In the heart of Kitale, Kenya, there was music, food, and colorful clothes. It looked like a happy wedding. But one face in the crowd told a different story, Zawadi's. She was only 19, and her eyes showed no joy. While everyone else smiled and danced, she stood silently in her bridal gown, her heart heavy. Zawadi was being married off to Mwalimu, a wealthy man old enough to be her father. Her father beamed with pride, not because his daughter found love, but because he was receiving cows, money, and respect from the village. To him it was a good deal. To Zawadi, it was a cage. She didn't choose this life. No one asked her what she wanted. She loved school. She dreamed of becoming a nurse. But all of that was pushed aside for tradition and wealth. The wedding went on, but Zawadi's spirit was quiet. Her smile was missing, her laughter locked away. It wasn't her wedding, it was her sale. As the guests celebrated, few noticed the sadness in the bride's eyes. In a world that often forgets the voices of girls like Zawadi, this wedding was not a celebration of love. It was a reminder of how easily dreams can be traded for cows. Zawadi didn't cry. She had cried too many times already. But in her silence, she carried a question that still hangs in the air. When will her life belong to her? It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, her wedding day. But for Zawadi it felt like just another day of hard work. From the moment the sun rose, she was already in the kitchen. Smoke stung her eyes as she lit the firewood. Her hands, already tired, stirred big pots of rice and soup. Her stepmother, a ketch, barked orders at her. "Move faster," she snapped, as Zawadi ran barefoot across the yard, sweeping, cooking, and carrying trays of food. While other brides would be dressing in white gowns, getting their hair done, and smiling for photos, Zawadi wore an old, faded wrapper. Her feet were dirty. Her face had no makeup, only sweat. Guests began to arrive, laughing and dancing. They brought phones to take selfies, dressed in bright colors, ready to enjoy the big day. But no one noticed the bride working in the background, her arms full of plates and her back aching. Children ran past her, almost knocking the dishes from her hands. Still she said nothing. She smiled politely, even though her heart felt small and heavy. The smell of food filled the air, but she had not eaten. Every time someone called her name it was to serve, not to celebrate. Zawadi watched as the groom arrived, proud and surrounded by friends. People clapped. Her father nodded with pride. But she didn't feel proud. She felt invisible. She was the bride, yet she was treated like a servant. Not once did anyone ask if she was okay. No one offered her water or helped her rest. It was her wedding, but it didn't feel like hers. Felt like a job. Her smile was missing again, and her eyes told a quiet story of pain. A story that no one was listening to. As music played and people danced, Zawadi stood alone behind the kitchen, washing dishes while others took photos in front of her wedding decorations. She wasn't a bride that day. She was just the chore girl. And deep inside she wished anyone would notice her and say the words she needed most. "You deserve better." The drums were loud, the music full of life. People danced, clapped and laughed as speeches were made under the big tent. Mwalimu, the groom, sat proudly on a decorated chair like a king. He wore shiny clothes and sunglasses, nodding as people praised him. Guests shouted blessings and gave gifts. The air was full of joy, for everyone except the bride. Zawadi wasn't sitting next to him. She wasn't getting her photo taken or listening to kind words about her beauty. She was in the kitchen behind the crowd, standing over a hot stove. Her hands were shaking as she fried samosas in sizzling oil. The hot oil popped suddenly and burned her fingers. She winced in pain but didn't cry out. She knew no one would care. She dipped her fingers quickly in cool water and kept working. Her clothes were soaked in sweat. Her wrapper was stained from the cooking oil. Her hair stuck to her forehead, and her feet ached from standing all day. She glanced through the window at the crowd where people laughed and took selfies. No one noticed she was missing. She bit her lip, holding back tears, and whispered quietly to herself, "Is this my forever?" Her heart felt heavy. She had dreamed of love, freedom, and choosing her own future. But all she got was silence, chores, and pain. As the music grew louder, her world felt smaller. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. She wanted to scream, but her voice felt locked inside. So she stayed there, frying samosas, hiding her tears behind the smoke. While everyone else cheered, Zawadi cried inside. Not for the day, but for the life she never got to choose. The wedding party was in full swing. Laughter filled the air. Plates clinked, children ran around with juice boxes, and everyone was eating well. Beef stew, rice, chapati, and samosas. Music played loudly, and Mwalimu sat like a king at the head table, smiling wide, full of pride. No one noticed Zawadi standing in the corner, her hands still smelling of smoke and cooking oil. She was too tired to cry now, too numb to feel. Then suddenly everything changed. A black SUV rolled up to the compound. The engine went silent, and all eyes turned to the entrance. The car door opened, and out stepped a tall woman dressed in a clean white suit. Her heels clicked softly on the dusty ground. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, like she could see through walls. She walked slowly, gracefully, with purpose. People whispered to each other, unsure who she was. "I'm looking for Zawadi Nanjala," the woman said, her voice gentle but firm. The music stopped. Everyone froze. Some dropped their spoons. Mwalimu blinked. Akeche stood up quickly, her face tight with anger and fear. "Why are you looking for her?" Akeche asked sharply. The woman looked at her, then turned back to the silent crowd. "Because," she said clearly, "I believe she's been lied to her entire life." Gasps filled the air. Guests looked at each other in confusion. Zawadi peeked from behind the kitchen door. Afraid, confused, and curious all at once. Her heart beat fast. Who was this woman? Why was she looking for her? And how did she know her name? For the first time all day, Zawadi saw the crowd stop and turn toward her. The bride was finally being noticed, not for what she was doing, but for who she might truly be. And somewhere deep inside her, a tiny flame of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, this was not the end of her story, but the beginning. Everyone at the wedding stood still, eyes fixed on the tall woman in white. Zawadi's heart pounded as the woman stepped forward and looked directly at her. Her voice was calm, but her words were powerful. "My name is Dr. Louisa," she said. "I am a human rights lawyer, and I've come here today with the truth." The guests looked around in confusion. Mwalimu frowned. Akecha's hands began to shake slightly, but she crossed her arms tightly and said nothing. Dr. Louisa turned to the crowd, then slowly looked at Zawadi. "Zawadi," she said gently, "you are not Akecha's daughter. She is not your real mother." Zawadi froze. Her breath caught in her chest. She had always wondered, always felt different, like she didn't belong. But no one ever gave her answers. Dr. Louisa continued, "Your biological mother, her name was Mama Halima Nanjala, was a landowner. She owned a large piece of land right here in Kitao. But after she died suddenly, someone tricked her into signing her land away while she was very ill." Gasps filled the air. People whispered and pointed. Akech looked down, her face suddenly pale. "And that someone," Dr. Louisa said, "was Akech. She lied to the court. She kept you as her stepdaughter, made you do chores, and hid your true identity. But the truth has come out. Zawadi, you are the rightful heir to your mother's land and name." Zawadi felt dizzy. Her legs shook. All her life, she had been treated like a servant, like nothing. But now this woman, a stranger, was telling her that she came from strength, from legacy, from something powerful. Tears filled her eyes. But this time they were not from sadness. For the first time, Zawadi saw a different version of her life. A life with choices. A life where she was not sold for cows, but where she stood tall like her mother once did. Everyone at the wedding stared at her. But now she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. And maybe, just maybe, her forever was about to change. Zawadi stood frozen. Her mouth was slightly open but no words came out. Everyone stared at her, waiting for her reaction. Her hands shook, and her eyes searched the faces in the crowd. She looked at Dr. Louisa, confused and overwhelmed. "No," she whispered. "This can't be true. Ketch raised me. She told me my mother died poor and left nothing. I was lucky to have a home." Her voice trembled as she spoke. Dr. Louisa stepped closer and gently opened the folder she was holding. I understand, Zawadi, she said softly. But your whole life has been a lie. She showed Zawadi a photo of a smiling woman holding a baby. This is your mother. And that baby is you. Zawadi stared at the photo, tears forming in her eyes. Her fingers slowly reached for it, her breath short and shaky. Dr. Louisa then showed her a second document. A DNA test result with Zawadi's name printed clearly. This proves you are Halima Nanjala's biological daughter, she explained. And here, she said, handing her an old leather-bound book. This is your mother's journal. She wrote about you, her daughter she loved deeply, and how she feared the people around her wanted to take everything away. Zawadi's knees gave out. She fell to the ground crying, her heart breaking into pieces. Her whole life, every slap, every chore, every insult, every moment she felt worthless. All of it came crashing down. She had been lied to, used, abused, and stripped of her birthright. And now, in front of everyone, the truth was finally out. Gasps spread through the crowd. People began whispering and murmuring. Some looked at Akesh with disgust. Others looked at Zawadi with sadness. The music had stopped, the joy had faded, and silence took over. Zawadi covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. She wasn't just the girl in the kitchen anymore. She was a stolen daughter, a forgotten heiress. And finally, for the first time, the world was starting to see her truth.